Hello, and welcome to the Beyond Screens Alternative Controller Show. My name is Alistair, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Tatiana. How are you doing, Tatiana?
Hello. Well, great, as usual. How are you?
Yep, doing well. Been
Wonderful.
enjoying a lot of sunshine recently.
Okay, cool. Yeah, in this show, we invite makers of alternative controller games, video games, to tell us about their work and show us what they're working on. This is what we're going to do right now.
Yep, that is correct. And so, for those of you who might be new to the world of alternative controllers, these are video games made to be played using unusual custom made devices. For example, a game might be controlled using a door stopper, or maybe an electric guitar, or perhaps even a paper shredder. Or the creator might invent a totally new object made by soldering together their own electronic components.
And today's guests are practicing artists and researchers and lecturers, lecturers at Alberta University in Dundee, Scotland. I'm pretty sure. These are Mona Bozdog and Lynn Love. Mona is a lecturer in immersive experience design. Her research is practice-based and focuses on the convergence of contemporary performance practices and video games, particularly designing hybrid forms of storytelling, performative games, mixed reality and immersive experiences in games for public spaces and heritage site. And Lynn, she's a lecturer in animation and interactive media. And when she's not teaching, she's making strange interactive works, performances, and events which fuse digital media and the physical world, that tries to make the world more playful and often makes people feel a bit socially awkward. Before we invite them on, let's have a little look at some of their creations.
So let's welcome onto the stream Lynn Love and Mona Bozdog. Woo!
Hi.
Welcome.
Hello.
How are you doing?
Good, thanks.
Good. We're loving the energy.
Thanks so much for joining us. It's such a pleasure to have you on this show.
Oh,
Thank
thanks
you
for
so
having
much
us.
for
Sorry, Mona.
Well, I guess
it's exactly what I was gonna say.
Well, I mean, maybe where we could start is just, where you both sort of started out, how you got into making games and exploring play. I mean, so we understand, Mona, that before you were in video games, you were in the theater. Is that correct?
Yes, long time ago. And so my background is in theater and community theater. I was a playwright and dramaturg and director. And yeah, it's quite a weird journey, but I think kind of like looking across this landscape, it seems like a lot of us who are doing weird things with games tend to come from performance backgrounds. So it's perhaps not that surprising, I guess. But yeah, so I started in theater back in Romania as a playwright, and I was exploring forms of interactive theater before I kind of knew what was happening. And I think that kind of like led me to apply for a PhD at Abertay University, which was looking at combining performance with video games. And I thought, this sounds great, because this is exactly what I'm at with my practice at the moment. I'm trying to see what happens if my audience starts responding back, what happens if we take that interaction and kind of roll with it. And kind of like embracing the chaos a little bit, which, you know, for a playwright is not great. You want your play to be kind of like going great. We do tech rehearsals, everything's fine. But the second you kind of embrace that interaction, you have to also embrace the chaos and the beauty of the emergent that kind of comes along with it. And yeah, that's how I kind of arrived at Abertay. It was weird because I think my experience with games were level creators for Heroes in the Wake of Gods that I used to play with my sister, and Diablo 2 with my high school friends. So since then, I've not seen games or interacted with them much. And then I started my PhD in, no, I'm just not gonna remember, 2015.
2019. You started in 2015, but you finished it in 2019, right?
Yes, on track. Yay. So yeah, that's kind of how I arrived at Abertay, and that's how I arrived at games, I think. So that's my story.
Wow. And so, Lynn, and your background was, am I right in understanding, a bit more sort of technical background? You were in, sort of started out in computer arts. Is that correct?
Yeah, yes. My undergraduate degree was computer arts. I actually studied at Abertay. I'm one of them that you know. Abertay does this thing where you become the Abertay family, they call it. But yeah, I got sort of sucked in. I wanted to be an animator because when I was growing up, I played a lot of couch co-op games. I totally loved, you know, taking turns with my sister on the sofa. I say I loved it. Looking back, I loved it. I think at the time I was just waiting for my turn and trying to wrestle it off her, you know, the reality of kids playing couch co-op.
Yeah.
But yeah, that inspired me to go into animation. So I trained as an animator. And then I found myself teaching at Abertay. I think I started in 2010. And I was looking at animation, and I was looking at meaning making, and I was really kind of interested in abstract animation and how to make meaning. And it was in that environment, surrounded by people that were making games, it was kind of a hop, skip and a jump into interactivity because of the chaos that Mona was talking about, you know, and the fact that there's this, you design interactive experiences, but then when people interact with them, they make their own meaning and they have their own relationships with it. So it didn't seem like that much of a jump to go from animation into interactive animation into video games. And I also sort of like to blend video game design with play design, because actually they're separate, and I don't really understand why, you know, play theory is kind of separate to design theory when it comes to video games. So I'm totally in love with kind of playful experiences, whether they're analog or digital. And I think that's what brings Mona and I together, I think, because there's the whole background of theatre games and playfulness inside theatre that I think Mona's super comfortable in. And I think we work really well together because I have that sort of technical side of things, and I'm thinking about computers and digital and how things work, and Mona's thinking very playfully. And I'm always like, yeah, but how will the game know? And Mona's like, the game doesn't need to know, we can just make it playful. And yeah, we kind of are two sides that, you know, are sort of more technical and more creative, that I think helps us to work well together. I maybe jumped ahead to a future question there. Sorry, I hope I answered what you asked.
No, that's fantastic. And that's your show tonight or today for the viewers from elsewhere. You did your PhD at Abertay. I'm pronouncing this not correctly, but that's okay because English is not my native language anyway. So you did your PhD about the same time Mona did hers. I think you finished 1 year before her. You met there at Abertay University?
Yeah. So I was a full-time lecturer at Abertay, and I did my PhD part-time along with teaching computer arts. So I teach sort of technical art and animation and design. So Mona joined in 2015, and yeah, we went through the sort of PhD experience together. I was focusing on designing play for participation, so how to get adults to participate in play. and how play can help to bring people together. So how you can meet a stranger and not be so much of a stranger by the end of the game that you've played together, which is a quality that I love about play. So my PhD was all around that, and I finished in 2018. But I'd started in 2013, so I took a bit longer because I was part-time. And then we met at Arate. They put us together because we were both doing weird video game stuff. And luckily we kind of clicked and started to make stuff together thanks to Global Game Jam. I think that was sort of the thing that motivated us to take a weekend and to do some stuff that was separate to the PhD, because it's kind of hard when you're teaching full-time and researching and trying to put together a PhD to then make time for fun side projects. But thankfully Global Game Jam exists, and we always try and make time for it year on year to make things.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that's an art collective or maybe a more informal group of persons, but from what we saw online, you were part of a group called Smash It Open and See What's Inside. So
Great
it
name.
was yeah, great name. The name is fantastic. And it was you two plus other people, but most of the time Danny Parker and Alex Pass, from what we've seen. And so you did Global Game Jam every year all together for like 4 years in a row. Is that basically how you started making games together?
Yeah, I mean, I think we talk regularly, but I think Global Game Jam was where we started to get an opportunity to make stuff. So we're both part of Abertay Game Lab, so we make things together through that. And Smash It Open and See What's Inside is the name for Danny, Alex, Mona, and I making stuff together. And unfortunately, due to the pandemic, we haven't been able to do it the last couple of years. But hopefully next year, we've got plans for next year. But yeah, Mona, do you want to say anything about
teasing hard? So the first game we found online was Hola de la Vida. And maybe you can talk a bit about this, but it involves a poncho, a shared poncho.
It involves a poncho, people holding hands under the poncho, kind of playing a little bit of tug of war there, playing together, coordinating, trying to make the best out of this three-headed poncho that they're wearing. But yeah, I just kind of wanted to add to what Lynn was saying. I think it was a big moment for me doing my first game jam. As somebody who was not coming from a games background, I found it very intimidating. And I think I still have this reticence for technology. And I think it was Squingy on your show that was talking about, masking our technical limitations with, poncho. What can I do? Well, I can sew, I can make a poncho, and I can make a physical installation. So I think to a degree it all kind of stemmed for that. But yeah, when I met Lynn, she was so awesome, and she took me under her wing and invited me to take part with them. So that was my humble beginning, I think.
Well, to give you some context, Danny in our team, he's a programmer, so he's the real technical brain, so we have to give him major props that we would make any games if it wasn't for him. And quite often his Global Game Jam experience is rotten because he has to code everything while Mona and Alex and I are like, let's make a tent, or let's make a giant poncho, or let's make a controller with way too many buttons, which was our last game that we did together. So and Alex is a designer. They both work in industry, in mobile game design. So I think Global Game Jam is quite an exciting thing for them to do because it's totally not commercial. The things that we make aren't commercial in any way. But yeah, Ola de la Vida, I think, is a really good example of what I was saying about the technical meets, Mona's theatre and practical background, because in the game we wanted the players always had to hold hands. That's the awkwardness that I think Tatiana was commenting on. So we wanted them always to have to hold hands to maintain the game. So you can only play the game if all three of you are holding hands. And I was like, how do we have the game manage that? How do we make sure the game knows that they're always holding hands and can stop? And Mona's response was, we don't need to have the machine do it. If we give them a poncho which has 3 holes in it, and they all have to be in the same poncho straight away, they feel like they're together, they're a team, they have to work together. So the poncho, we did get the computer, we used the makey and made a circuit and all that sort of stuff with golden Maraca controllers to make sure that they're always holding hands. But the poncho's actually been super successful because people that are shy about holding hands with strangers don't mind holding hands when they're inside the poncho because nobody can see that they're holding hands. It's almost like the poncho then gave permission. It gave permission to stand up and be silly in front of people, because in the game you got to rock side to side. And for some reason, you all being in the poncho and being a team together, people are okay with doing that. And even though it's sort of like a dance or a performance and you're on show in front of an audience often, because this game tends to be shown at sort of like a play party or an indie game night. People don't mind being on show or standing up, and they don't find it intimidating because they're a team and they're inside this poncho, and it's also apparently quite a good selfie opportunity, which has a draw.
And in your in the sort of supporting materials on so this was from Mona's website, I believe you talked about designing it with the intention of kind of fostering spectatorship. I mean, could you talk a bit about that? I mean, in the process of making it, did you discover anything about, you know, where good spectatorship comes from and what good spectatorship can do?
Yeah, and I think I think we wanted the game to be really bold and really loud and really colorful. And every time we install it, it's got tons of like fairy lights, and it kind of like draws people in and of itself. But also it's big. It's got 3 screens, 3 players at arm's length, on each of them sat on a balance board, the colorful bright orange poncho. So it already draws people in. And I think one of the things that was really interesting was that people felt less shy about taking part because they focus on the game, they focus on the screen gives them a goal. So then they feel all of a sudden a little bit less intimidated. And we've started seeing like these beautiful movements that start forming. I think the poncho encourages them a little bit as well, but also the fact that they forget that it's actually a balance board. So you don't need to do all of this gestural excess. It actually, it works fine without it, but people still perform and they still do the wave movements with their arms. The thing for Global Game Jam was waves. So I think it succeeded in that.
It's interesting how already at such an early point in your career, or whatever, let's call it a career, I mean, work evolution, there is this thing that is going through all your works together, at least from my point of view, which is putting together spectatorship and permission to play. And what's really interesting is that there are several reasons, several things that makes that possible. But one of them is how values are embodied by props, costumes, the scenery. It symbolizes the fact that in this time and space that is this installation game, things will be different, rules will be different, and that's okay, which resonates a lot with me because I take judo usually as an example of this. Exactly, the moment you put your judo gi, tie your belt, and go on the mat, it symbolizes the moment from which I can start. We don't hurt people, but I can be aggressive, and it won't be hostility. It will be part of the sport, the game. And that's fascinating how this is found and evolve in all your work. So is it just my view of thing, just an interpretation, or is that something you're actively looking for in your work?
I think it might be my fault a little bit. Some of it's my fault. I think
guilty.
No. I mean, I love the way that you're talking about it. And actually, when we've been researching about the poncho, because I think Ola de la Vida is the game that we've written most about, just because it's the oldest. But exactly what you're saying about your judo experience, that's what the poncho does. It gets people ready and it gives them permission and things. And actually, there is this thread of permission through our work. But I think every year when we get together for Global Game Jam, I'm always like, I want to make something multiplayer, and it always has to be multiplayer. So that's why I say it's my fault, is because I'm always like, right, we have to have people playing together, because my whole thing is social play, and I'm really interested. I don't want to make a single player game. So a little bit of the sort of interest in participation and getting people involved. I think when you play together, and you can watch people play, it makes it easier. You know, it gives you permission to participate. But then what is amazing is that the four of us have worked together so often and all have quite creative and different approaches, that it grows these beautiful arms and legs that build worlds. So Mona has a theatre background, but Alex is an avid game designer. He plays a lot of D&D. He also is the best person at making Halloween costumes I've ever seen ever. So he has just cupboards and cupboards of stuff. Which means that the set dressing becomes easy. So we've got this game, Tales of Monstrous Intent, which was the second game we made together, which is played inside a tent. And we were sort of struggling in the brainstorming phase to come up with something. And I said, hey, why don't we make a game inside a tent? That was the idea, right? There wasn't anything else. A multiplayer game inside a tent, and then we made probably one of our most successful games together, I think. And Stranger Things was really big around then, so it got this whole 80s theme, and there's a monster in the woods, and because we're all grew up in the 80s, she's giving away our ages. We could draw, like Alex could draw from his cupboard full of stuff. So the tent is just so rich with storytelling. It's filled with like He-Man figures and little D&D figures and first editions of Ian Livingstone books. I can't remember the name.
Fighting Fantasy.
yes, thank you. And then that's where this world, I think, comes in that you're talking about, Tatiana, is that, the strengths and that everybody brings, it builds a world that then makes you step outside your comfort zone, step outside your norms. It gives you permission to be someone else and to get involved. I think the nice thing about Tales of Monstrous Intent in comparison to Ola de la Vida is it's more of an intimate experience. You sit inside a tent. The tent is the screen. So it's alternative screens that we're kind of quite interested in as well. And you sit on a wee balance board, I think. I would love to meet other people that are working with wee balance boards. I don't know if we're the only people that are like, 10, 15 years on are still like, balance boards are ace. But you sit on them and that you control the game with your bum. So the monster appears behind you and you have to go left, right, duck or stay still to avoid it. But you don't know what you have to do because the monster's behind you. So your co-players have to tell you what to do. So then that brings the sort of teamwork and the camaraderie, and that what I was saying about playing a game and how it can bring strangers together. This game does that really well because you're in this little tent that's set up like being in the 80s with this eerie music and a monster. Do you know, like, what is going to bring you together more than a horror experience, I guess?
Camping. And I think that's another thing that I would add maybe to what Tatiana was kind of like already observing about, the themes that run through the work. It's also the fact that we don't tend to make competition games. We tend to make games where we encourage players to take care of one another. And we teach them how to do that through gameplay. So, La Da Vida, you have to watch each other's space. You have to help each other, because if the player in front of you gets stuck, then you're stuck as well and you will lose as a team. And the same in Tales of Monstrous Intent, you literally have to watch each other's backs because the danger is behind you. So you depend on your co-players to pick that up and tell you what to do, whether to dodge or to move left or right. So yeah, I think that's another really interesting thing, and the community that kind of creates within that intimate setting, which is the tent.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is this. I mean, when you compare the two of them, it's like seeing them side by side. There is some sort of interesting, sort of difference or similar. It's like who's watching you, and I think that's an interesting thing. With Ola de la Vida, you have this big extravagant costume. You're playing it on a big screen. It kind of lends itself to being watched by an audience, and I can kind of expect that it's a very different experience in playing it in front of a crowd to playing it on your own in the when you were developing it. And then here you've got a game where the setting blocks you from the outside world, and it is impossible to be spectated now. And like I guess, is there like did you learn something through making these about the way that spectatorship works?
I think that in Ola de la Vida, we learned a lot about spectatorship inside the game as well as outside the game. So because the games, you're codependent on one another, you're watching as you're playing and you have to help each other. So we were looking at the spectatorship inside the game, and it's funny, there's so many of our student game designers, whenever we talk to them about this game, they want to fix it because they don't like that you're codependent, and they think it's a flaw. You might not be doing anything at a certain point in the game, and it's like, no, it's on purpose. But then with earlier on today, it was great. Mona described Tales of Monstrous Intent. Like, we took Ola de la Vida and just wrapped it around the players, which I thought was a beautiful way of describing it. And what we did then was we went on to think about spectatorship in different ways. So you have this intimate experience when you're playing, but then for people that are waiting outside to play, I mean, we've installed it in a big room where we built a whole campsite, and we had like projections of woods around, and we had trees and lights, and we had lots of dressing everywhere, and it became almost like I guess, drawing from sort of theme park ideas of the queue system, and trying to sort of embed you in the world beforehand. And so we started to think about spectatorship that way. And you can spectate the game to an extent because it's projected on the outside, so you can see the gameplay, but you don't know how to play it until you're inside the tent. But then it's very intuitive on how to play it because you just have to wiggle your, I think that's another thing that we think is really important with participation is we don't make super complex controllers so that it levels the playing field and everybody can get involved. But yeah, we started to think about spectatorship in another way. And I think those two games probably deal best with spectatorship that we've made together. Mona, would you say that's fair? Because the other two are much more about the objects that you're playing with and the kind of the interaction between the players rather than the whole kind of setting.
And we're still thinking about it all, because I think for me what's really interesting with Tommy is that you enter the world and then you see some people going in a tent and you hear them laughing and you hear them having this amazing experience. It almost kind of like teases you to want to play it a little bit. It's like you hear children playing and there's a fence and you can't see what they're doing, but you can hear them play. And I think there's something really exciting about the ways in which you invite this participation, in which you can tease it and make it really welcoming. So I think we're still talking a lot about Tommy, because I think there's a lot of things that we still need to figure out, because we were talking about it. It's had a slightly unfortunate life with COVID. We haven't been able to test extensively, and yeah, but we're definitely getting to it because we think there's still something really exciting happening there.
Yeah, but that both are really interesting because the fact that you are being seen in Ola de la Vida participate in a new form of intimacy, which is we play as a team and everyone is watching us. So of course that's intimidating both for the spectators, which will learn how to play easily but may not want to be put up front on stage or kind of stage, but as a team, it's kind of us against the world as we will be judged collectively. It's completely different with an immersive hidden experience where there is more the teasing, the mystery of what is this group of persons doing that is oh so funny. It reminds me of these YouTube videos where you can only see the reaction of people and not what's actually displayed on screen. So these are really complementary, I believe, on what can be done about intimacy and spectatorship on 3 levels. Spectators as outside the game, players watching other players, and the player watching himself playing. So yeah, there are many. That's an onion, hyper interesting onion to analyze. But you've done another game the year after that, which is House on Fire. Maybe we can talk about this so we see the evolution of your thinking on all that.
Yeah, I think objects are quite important to us, and that leveling the playing field as well. So kind of, I think House on Fire and Overreactor, which we did the following year, those are probably true alt controller games, whereas the ones previous were using the Wii balance board, but just trying to play with screens and play with the way that the people input using those devices. So House on Fire is a 1980s Duplo set, so that's one of things out of Alex's cupboard again, and we used the Makey Makey and we wired it up, and I think it was sort of inspired by being householders, I guess, and being of a certain age and having a lot of responsibilities at home. Do you remember what the theme was that year, Mona?
Fire.
Fire. Well, there you go.
Quite straightforward.
So we wired, we set up the Duplo house, and we wired up a tin foil. So there were touch points inside it, and we made a Duplo phone that rings, and you answer the phone, and it gives you a task to carry out, and you have to you have an armband that you wear so you can kind of complete the circuit. It's really low tech, but it's basically Twister with your fingers. So there's all these different rooms, and you have to hold multiple things at once, until they phone you back and tell you that you can stop. But you also have to be able to answer the phone whilst touching things. So you can play it by yourself, but it's really hard, and you're likely to lose. And the game's not very nice to you if you lose. It's got a sort of sarcastic Scottish gran that says, "Oh, you tried your best, didn't you? But you're very disappointing," sort of thing. But because it's a circuit and because it's a makey, other people can join in. So long as they're holding your arm, they can also hold things for you. So then it can become a communal experience. People don't play it like that unless you prompt them, because I think all of our games are made to be played in spaces where people can watch. And as soon as people can watch and they can see other people playing, they add layers to the gameplay, and they get the idea. But this one definitely needed prompting, and it's very audio focused as well. So we've learned about when you showcase in busy environments, audio focused games don't do ever so well because you can't hear so much when there's a lot of back chatter. So it's got some interesting. It's got this object focus. It's anybody can play it so long as they've got a pulse, because it's all just based on conductivity. But it was less successful, I guess, in a public environment because you need to be able to hear. But we do like that. I think that's again where the awkwardness and the intimacy comes in, because you can do better in the game if you're willing to touch each other. And we found that we haven't studied it quite as much as the other games, but we found that tends to work really well amongst groups of people that know each other, but it's not something that it doesn't evoke the same things as Ola de la Vida in terms of being willing to hold hands with strangers. Like, people are less cool inside that game, inside House on Fire, with the idea of touching each other. Of course, everything that we do, COVID has changed how people feel generally about these games as well. So
I mean, do you have an idea of what it is that makes the difference in terms of willingness for people to touch each other's hands, with the difference between Ola de la Vida and House on Fire? Like, what makes people more or less reluctant to do it? Do you have a feel for that?
I think it might be the fact that it's a hidden act. I think the fact that the poncho must sit might help with that. Because it's not visible, it's under the poncho, and it's a kind of like a secret nudge, like, hey, you're my teammate, I got you. It's good. And I think it's really interesting, because now that Lynn's talking about it, I do realize that I think we respond very much to what's happening around us, because when we were making Ola de la Vida, there was a lot of community unrest. People were really anxious about current events. There were a lot of marches, there were a lot of protests, and strangers coming together. And I think it was kind of responding to that. It was like, okay, it's really nice for us to hold hands. Whereas House on Fire, we were all, I think, as Lynn was saying, responding to that environment because you are in the house and loads of things are demanding your attention and pulling you into 10 different places, and you have to put out all of these fires that are happening because your grand wants something from you, and your grandpa wants something from you, and your kids want something for you, and being pulled in all of these kind of conflicting directions, I think.
You raise a really interesting point, actually, one that I hadn't thought about, and that Ola de la Vida is really fun and lighthearted. Tales of Monstrous Intent is a bit scary. We've had some people be terrified by that game.
Oh, wow.
And then House on Fire stresses people out. So it's not got that sort of kind of supportive thing. Like, I think with Tales of Monstrous Intent, people get a bit scared, but they're together, and there's friendship, and so we look after them. But in House on Fire, the phone is always ringing and somebody always wants something from you. And we've had a few people who've tested it for us that rage quit because they're like, no, I just don't want to do this anymore, because because they're just too much being asked, and it was maybe just a bit too close to the bone for some people in terms of their own life experience. You know, I'm a mum of two, so I totally get it when everybody wants something from you and it can be a bit much. Don't get me wrong, I love my kids, but it can be quite overwhelming, you know. So I think that's another thing about that game, is you are so kind of concentrating on all the different things you're having to do, and the phone is always ringing. So it's a different tone completely, and I think that might shape the willingness, or even having the headspace to be able to interact with other people whilst you're playing it.
Yeah. I mean, I guess on another thing, I'm just, you know, what I'm seeing is it says, from what you're describing, House on Fire is a game in which you are trying not to lose, whereas Ola de la Vida is a game where you're trying to win. You know, both of these things are, like, you know, mathematically the same, but, you know, framing wise, they are quite different objectives. Do you think that plays into it or something?
I think that's an excellent point, actually. and something really good to think about. I think it's also something that Lynn was saying about creating the space and the time and the rhythm in which people can interact with other people, and in which players can interact with one another. Because I think it's the rhythm of House on Fire that's making it really kind of anxiety inducing.
Right.
That it no longer kind of leaves that space for working together to solve the problems, I think.
That makes a lot of sense. I'm kind of interested, sort of from a kind of a research perspective. When you you know, when you start these projects for the Global Game Jam, do you go in with a kind of a set, you know, a research question in mind, or is that sort of something that kind of evolves and grows as you see people interact with it and sort of find out what interesting things it raises?
I think that Mona and I have curiosities in areas that we're quite interested in. So although we won't necessarily explicitly voice a research question in a Global Game Jam environment, because that's quite formal, I think that we're thinking about, we've got particular reflections on things that we've made previously. We've got reflections on how they've tested and what we've learned, and we've also got questions in our minds about things that we want to explore. So I'm always thinking about making it multiplayer and making it social, and making different kinds of social experiences. And I'm sure that Mona similarly comes in with sort of similar ideas. I don't want to talk on your behalf, Mona. That, you know, are the beginnings, the buds of research questions. And I think that, annoyingly, perhaps for our collaborators, we use that to steer us over the 48 hours of making the game. So whenever I sort of feel that like the social play side is disappearing, I'll be sort of like pushing back, yeah, but we need to be doing something like this, or you know. So I'm always sort of thinking about the things that we've learned previously and the questions that I have, but not to the detriment of the team. I will back off, you know, if it's like not the best thing for the game, then, because it's not just about research questions and about that kind of practice. It is also about being a team and kind of working together and making something for fun. So I think it's there's always the buds and the beginnings of something, and then we see after Global Game Jam if it has legs, and then we tend to develop the games further. So Ola de la Vida has had a ton, and so is Tales of Monstrous Intent. They've both had a ton of development after, to make them work and to build on these ideas and things that we're interested in. Is that fair, Mona?
Yeah, and I think it's also avoiding repetition, because I think that's another thing, you know, one of the main things that defines research is that it is something new. So I think that's another thing that we kind of keep in mind. So I think we define research quite broadly. We go in, we know our topics, and we know the themes that we're interested in, and we have curiosities of practice rather than research questions. But I think it's definitely directed, and I think we do bring our researcher hats with us into the process. Whether we define it as such as we're making them, not so much, because I think we do start to make sense of a lot of what's happened through reflection after. But I do think going in, we always carry that researcher hat on.
Do you start with experience intentions then? Do you at the beginning of a jam agree on some sort of experience you'd like to convey. House on Fire is very different from the other, and yet I can tell there is an alignment of things, like just the narrative settings, which we didn't talk about, but playing as a group in a house in fire, on fire, is already telling that you will be a lot sollicité, anyway, asked a lot of things. Well, it's very different from let's have a little fright inside the tent with the monster. So there is an alignment even in the aesthetic, like for House on Fire. Yes, the house on fire, but it's all represented with toys. So this will give a little more soft side to this. Do you have some experience intentions at the beginning, and if so, how do you formalize them? Do you tell each other? Do you make a good document?
I wish that we did, but being completely honest, I think we actually start with what do we have. We kind of tend to start with what do we have access to. So we made Ola de la Vida. I had 3 projectors and I had a bunch of balance boards, and I was like, what could we do with this as a starting point, you know? And I hate that we sort of start from technology, but we sort of start from objects first, and then we start to bring in our kind of constraints in terms of what we're kind of interested in as researchers. I think Ola de la Vida was the start of it, so it was very technology focused because we didn't necessarily think that it was going to be a research project so much. That's kind of evolved year on year with what we've done. Whereas I say when we came into Tales of Monstrous Intent, the ideation phase was much longer because I think we were starting to think about trying to hold all these threads together of the different things. I think the experience comes kind of intuitively as we try to get something prototyped quickly, or we try to act it out. So we're very good at kind of role playing. We think that's kind of quite important. So we're like, okay, how would this work? So when we came up with this idea of the 3 people in a tent, we just sat down and looked at each other and think, right, what could you do? And then we got the balance boards and we're like, right, can the balance boards do that? Can they tell when you're going left or right or ducking, or, you know? And then the experience came from a mix of what did we have access to, but also how does it act out and how does it feel? And then we start to layer kind of on top of that. And I think, but I hadn't really thought about that before. And unfortunately, in the moment of the sort of 48 hours, we don't jam for 48 hours. I think like we jam maybe for 12. We do like healthy working where grown-ups, not grown-ups, but we have responsibilities and things. So we try and have sensible work practices. So the documentation tends to happen after the fact. So we capture as many photos as we can during the process, but all the documentation comes in, and reflection, as Mona said, comes afterwards.
And I think in terms of, because, you know, Tatiana, you were talking about tension, and I was thinking more about conflict. So I think in general, we frame the conflict as being external. The conflict is the game somewhat. And it's creating those adversarial conditions that make people bond and come together, I think, to a degree, because I think that's another thing that's interesting and tends to come up time and time again, is that we always frame the conflict externally, and the game can be the enemy, and that gives you something to kind of band against.
It helps the camaraderie, and it helps people to form bonds, I think, if they're working together against a shared adversary, you know. So all of the games have something that you're working against.
Oh, that's really interesting. It's at this point, my view on these 3 games is that I would say you design a gameplay that is based on a form of, I would say it, an aggression coming from the exterior towards the group. The nature of this aggression is will instigate different social dynamics inside the group. And then it's up to the group to react in different ways to make it work. So that's really interesting how you are testing different possibilities, but coming every time from the same place, but with different angles. Yeah, that's a bit an hostile way to put that, but I like this image in playfulness sometimes, that it's not just about fun and giggles. Sometimes it's also about the tension in the game. That's interesting.
And I guess what's more tense than a nuclear reactor that's about to blow up, which...
I saw it coming.
That was amazing.
I was sure.
Which segues us neatly onto your 2020 Global Game Jam project, which was Overreactor. Could you tell us a bit about that?
So it's an asymmetric game where there's a nuclear reactor that's going to explode, and one of you are the technician and one's the engineer. So one person stands up and has a control panel up here, the other person's lying flat on their back underneath, like you would under a car if you're a mechanic, and they have lots of buttons and switches and things, and they have to work together to solve issues that the nuclear reactor throws up. So Mona did some really beautiful, I've never thought I'd say this out loud, but she made a beautiful handbook, like a microwave handbook kind of set of instructions. Basically the game throws up error codes. You have to look up error code and they have to work together looking at different interactive elements, but also the physical controller itself to work out what buttons they have to press in order to solve the error. And they basically just have to solve as many errors as they can before time runs out. So it's got the stress, I guess. I mean, this maybe says a lot about us coming to the end of our PhD and stuff, that the stress.
I think our lives in general have become more and more full of anxiety as time progresses.
But it's what I was saying about it's the controller that has too many buttons. So there's they have I think there's maybe 15 possible input devices, and then there's a manual that has lots of instructions and another little handbook as well. I think we took it to extreme in terms of input devices. With you don't need any skills for any of the input devices. They're all kind of just joysticks or buttons or plugs that you have to plug in and things. But I think we took it to the extreme in terms of input devices in comparison to everything that we did before that was very simple to interact with. So I think it's you're overwhelmed with information and also have the pressure of time because a nuclear reactor might explode. I don't know if I described that well at all, but that's kind of roughly what the game is. And I'm looking at you again, Mona, about what the theme was that year. I can't remember.
I can scroll off and find it right now. I'm showing the audience the Global Game Jam page right now, so I can see. So we had a kind of cooperation, paparazzi, we have cookies, and pro tip. Were those the themes?
Oh, I think those were diversifiers.
Diversifiers. All right.
It was repair.
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 Yeah, I think the theme sort of challenged us a bit because House on Fire did that. It was all about repairing and things. So I think we went quite extreme.
We did want to make a huge pair that you had to hug.
yeah. I think Mona and I are quite interested in sort of physical objects, and I'm quite keen to do some sort of sewn, conductive, kind of physical squishy things moving forward. And I think that was where that sort of started. We were this idea of having a big kind of squishy pair that you could interact with and things, but we didn't have any of those things to hand. So instead we went with all the buttons, I think. But we were, really inspired by the asymmetric games. I think were really coming to the fore in, just before that Global Game Jam was really kind of interested in giving players different kinds of information and how having different kinds of information might change the dynamic between the players, because they're still collaborating and working together, but it changes the kind of power dynamic, I think, if one's got the answer and the other doesn't. And I'd found things like keep talking and no one explodes, which I love, but I think one person has all the answers, and there was also what's Katie
Space Team, I assume, was
maybe I love Space Team. There's another one about vaccination, is it, where it's
from Alex Johansson.
Yes.
And it's vaccination, no? Isn't it just vaccination?
Yeah. It's Alex, Katie and Alex, we attended a workshop that they did, so I've got them in my head together, but yeah, it was Alex's project, I think. We're really kind of inspired by that, but again, one person has all the information and the other one sort of carrying out tasks, so we're playing with this idea of them both having answers, And how could you have like a flat hierarchy? But then I think, and we haven't, because thanks to the pandemic, we haven't studied this game at all yet academically. But I think it ended up with information overload because you don't have a clear role. Sometimes you're answering the questions, sometimes you're asking the questions and how to solve the problems. And I think actually in a game that's high pressured and time, it's tight on time, you do need clearer roles. And actually I can understand, I've learned a lot about asymmetric game design and why those games are so successful is because the time pressure works really well with knowing I have the answers and they're asking the questions, if that makes sense.
That does make a lot of sense. I mean, I think there's also an interesting thing going on here, which perhaps speaks to Mona's specialization, because the nuclear reactor as a setting is quite an evocative, narrative device to be working with, and like is part of what you're doing here is trying to explore how a gameplay device can shape a narrative.
A gameplay device, but also props and toys, and I think kind of like going full circle to those ideas that we were discussing at the beginning of creating that playground that kind of gives you permission to play. I think narratively is really tricky. I think particularly because we do want to give that freedom to make their own play story to the players. So I think kind of like giving them enough tools, and I think it was Dan Pinchback that calls them like narrative Lego bricks, giving enough, putting enough stuff in that playground to make it inviting, to invite that play and to give them enough to construct their own different scenarios and play experiences. I think it's important because I think no two people will have the same play experience, whether in a tent or they each have their own narrative about what happened. And I think exploring complex narratives is something that I've not done in a long time. But I don't think I miss it, actually. I think I quite, embracing the endless possibilities that the players can kind of bring to it. If you give them enough narrative content and enough rich props and things to build with, I think they'll build it.
Right. I mean, so does that, these kind of, that kind of more sort of playful kind of approach to narrative, does that kind of contrast with, say, the work that you did with the Inchholm Island? Was that more structured, or, by comparison?
Yeah, so that was the first one I've done. So that was a live performance that was inspired by The Arrestor. And it took place on an island in Scotland, and the audience walked around, and as they walked around, they triggered bits of audio, and they started finding bits of environmental storytelling that were like actual visual installations around the island, and again, making their own story. But I think that's where it kind of started for me, because even that was a series of poems that were pretty disconnected, and that allowed me to put them anywhere on the island. So it didn't really matter the order in which you collected them, because the audience could take their own paths around the island, and they could compose their own narrative depending on how they moved. So it was important to have that overarching theme, to have the mood that came with the Scottish. I mean, there's not much you can bring when nature does its thing. The mood was there, and then there were hints and symbols that were scattered around the island, kind of like allowing them to make their own story as they went. So I think it was very similar, actually, and I think that's where my PhD was kind of taking me, and that's what I kind of embraced throughout it, is I guess in a way unlearning how to be a playwright.
Right. Because on the Inchholm Island, you had musicians, there were cellists, violinists, and then I guess it was location-based audio coming through. Was that on mobile phones coming through earphones or something?
Yeah. We used sonic maps, so it was geotagged sound, and wherever you would go on the island, you had a little map, and it had little symbols on it with little paper boats, and that kind of marked the sound, but we had Easter eggs, and then there was the musicians composed a soundtrack as well, because you would walk, listen to the music would pull you through, and then you would start hearing the next music.
Oh, we have just lost. Oh no, have we lost Mona? Oh, I think you're back. I think you're back.
Okay.
Yeah, we lost you for like 30 seconds.
I think the internet might be tired of Inchholm Island.
But yeah, so you're talking about the location-based audio, and
yeah. Yeah, so it was we use Sonic Maps, which is a geotagging app, and that allowed us to create that playground that I was talking about all over the island. So we placed bits of audio, and as the audience moved around, they would gather these, they would interact with the musicians, they would find the visual installations, and all of these together were different types of puzzles almost. But yeah.
So I guess, I mean, that's the sort of, just talking about the sort of the playfulness of, I guess, the playfulness in there comes from the audience that, very much choosing their own path through the island, and you as a creator have you have kind of tangential guidance over how they do that. Does that sound accurate?
Yeah, that sounds exactly right. I think having that, and I think it's a lesson I learned in Inchholm, and I'll never go back to what I was doing before. The more you embrace that ambiguity in design, again, Dan Pinchback talks brilliantly about it. The more you open yourself up for some things that emerge that you're not expecting. So we had players going off in the wrong side of the island, finding random notes that they blended together and made a completely different story. So there's always an element of embracing the chaos.
Yeah,
I love the chaos.
And for you, Lynn, is chaos quite important to you in your practice? Away from the work that you create with Mona and the rest of the Smash It and See What It's Inside team.
Yeah, well, I think the stuff that we do together is quite chaotic. But yeah, a lot of what I've been doing in my own work has been very kind of about embracing chaos. So I've done projects which are kind of street-based works with chalk, and making playful invitations and playful experiences on the street, called One Plaything, and posting them on Twitter and things. And what I quite enjoy about that is that people will kind of happen upon them and have like a little smile or have like a little playful experience, and or just something that brightens up their day. So they're often kind of quite site-specific things. So there's a funny shaped puddle or an interesting road sign, and I'll add chalk to augment it, or they draw from kind of childhood experiences like hopscotch and floor is lava and things like that. So I'll mark off part of the street and make it into lava, and then hang around and watch people tiptoe around it or ignore it completely and burn their feet. So I guess it's chaotic in another way. It's trying to bring play into public spaces and inviting people to be playful every day, and that kind of led to Mona and I being commissioned by the V&A to do a playful chalkscape as well. So we did a large scale semi-permanent version of it, which was inspired by how to play together while staying 2 meters apart, thanks to the pandemic. That was really exciting because we installed 6 sort of playful experiences outside V&A Dundee, and it was there for I think 10, 11 months for people to interact with, and that was kind of quite interesting because we really embraced chaos with that, because we tried to make something that was kind of visually very pleasing, but then also had rules and could be played, or you could just it had lots of undulations and things in it, so we invited people to kind of run along lines, and kids to sort of spiral around and to play hopscotch and do all sorts of different things that they might be inspired to do. So it was kind of quite chaotic, but had a structured approach as well, which I think is quite nice. What I've learned about participation in getting adults in particular to participate in play is offering different levels of participation. So appreciating like what Mona said, that just hearing kids laughing and having fun, that's enough participation for some people. They just love that, knowing that play's happening, that lightens up their day, whereas other people want to get right in there and get like really involved in things. So yeah, with the Chalkscape, we tried to do that, have these different levels of participation. So you could be doing a dance with someone else, or you could be jumping around and making feel like you're perhaps making a fool of yourself, even though I don't think that's what you'd be doing, but some people might feel that way. But then there was other sort of things like there's this beautiful tunnel in B&A Dundee that has a lovely echo. So there was a game that just encouraged you to make noises to enjoy the echo, which is less demanding. And then we did a socially distanced selfie as well, which is like a low level of participation that most people would be happy with, you know. So we tried to have different levels to suit different age groups. There's a variety of people that you know, go to the V&A, whilst also letting them get as involved as they want to be and enjoy it in different ways, because it was all kind of rainbow colored and had these beautiful shapes and things. So I think you could just look at it and enjoy it if that's as much participation as you wanted to have. But then I've also since then been doing things, I'm on this project which is looking at co-production between UK and China of video games, and so I can't really talk about it, but I'm co-designing a mobile video game with a games company which is looking at social play across Chinese and UK audiences. So that's a completely different thing for me, and we found, I think, I hope you don't mind me saying this on your behalf, Mona, but we've both found that we had to kind of change our approach and change tact thanks to COVID, because we're really interested in getting people to touch each other and hold hands and play really closely or play inside tents, and all that disappeared. So we found ourselves in sort of different avenues and looking at how to bring our unique kind of approach to play and games and performance into a space where perhaps we can't be as close together as we once were. And there's tons that I could talk about. We did this cool installation with a whale as well, which I can talk about another day.
Please, yeah. I mean, it's all fascinating. It really is.
Yeah, and you can take 2 minutes to tell us about this mystery as well.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I felt like I was monologuing. I just.
Yeah, but a fascinating one. So that's fine.
Yeah. No, we're here to listen to you.
Yeah, well, it was really, I think, off the back of kind of our experience with V&A Dundee, I've been working with Dundee City Council and a sculptor called Lee Simmons, who was commissioned to make a whale sculpture in a prime site right next to V&A Dundee on the waterfront in Dundee. So he produced a 40-foot whale sculpture that sort of floats above a park, and a kind of interactive park, which is just really kind of stunning, and it's just changed the skyline in Dundee. And as part of that, I worked with Conglomerate Games, and we produced a 4-player cooperative social play game, which is installed outside, and it's totally COVID safe, which is kind of exciting. But it is based on some stuff that I did way back in 2015 with Danny Parker and Michael Doig and Will Wright at one of our kind of earliest game jams that we ran at Abertay. And we made this podium game. So it was a game where you project on 3 sides of a podium, and you had to kind of climb around the podium. So you had to have a race to the top, but in order to climb around the podium, you actually had to physically move around the room to see the different sides of the game. So we went on to make the game in Wilsong Park with Conglomerate Games, which is a 4-sided version of that. So it's a 360 game. So you play on as an individual player on one side, but some of the games require that you swap sides with each other, and some of the games go round all 4 sides. So it's got a sort of 8-bit retro feel to it, and it's because the whale, it's all water themed. So one of the games is it's made up of 6 mini games, and one of the games involves a boat that goes around the top of the screen all the way around, and you have a shoal of fish, and you have to try and avoid the net. They're very simple games because the audience that visit that area, there's a sandpit nearby, so the audience that visit that area are anything from sort of 3+ to 75. So the games are very simple, and there's a lot of button mashing and things in them as well. But it's really exciting to take an idea from 2015 and bring it to fruition and put it in a public space and think about how to get different people to play together with this sort of unique 360-degree screen that we've got. So again, I think it's less ALT controllers that I'm noticing about our work, in more alternative screens that we seem to be doing. So whether the pavement is our screen, or whether we've got a 360 screen, or we're using a tent as a screen, or in House and Fire, there's no screen at all. It's a Duplo house. You know, I think that's one of the kind of themes of the stuff that I've been doing, as well as bringing people together through play.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd call that far away from ALT control. I mean, ALT control, the name was kind of imposed by GDC and was catchy, and people, well, it stuck because it was catchy. But the truth is, even at ALT control GDC, the kind of work you see there are for a lot of them are playful installations or installations in the interactive installation sense. And honestly, I'd say I debate something other than that in this case, which is how is this alternative more than how is this a controller? And I'd say your work is alternative in the sense that, in heritage with critical design, I wouldn't call the Nintendo Power Glove alternative because, because of the patent, etc. It feels like Nintendo was trying to bring a new norm, not to oppose to the current norm. It's not a middle finger, you know what I mean? Like it's not a counterculture. It's just, okay, we are the future and we will make the norms of tomorrow. And there is in the idea of alternative, the idea for me to be, yeah, kind of countercultural, not just be eaten mentally by the norm and how you're supposed to use interfaces, how you are supposed to play a game. And your work is completely alternative for me. So because this was raised 2 or 3 times since the beginning, I wanted to give my take on this. Your work is completely alternative. You are really punk for me.
I'm gonna put that on my CV. You've just made my day.
I'll make a shirt of it, and when we'll see each other, I'll give it to you. And I would add just one thing because I'm really interested in this, and I know we will need to move on in 10 minutes or so, but there is something that I think is particularly interesting in what you said about one play thing and the idea of playing in an urban space. It changes a lot of things, and especially this kind of defiance that you need to have to play in the streets. And that's necessary for playfulness, because just following rules is not playfulness. I'm not playful when I assemble an IKEA furniture, and that's because the protocol is way too rigid. But if you ask me to make a sculpture out of IKEA parts, then suddenly it can be playful. So there is this idea in urban spaces that you play in the rules, but you take some liberties, some freedoms in this. And I was wondering if you could detail like what kind of rules the space, the choke marks, or conveying, embodying, just at least from one of the 6 games, just so we can have a clear idea.
Okay, and well, the 6, the one play thing's not structured in terms of the games.
Okay, I'm mixing two stuff. Sorry.
It's just make sure that I understand your question. But yeah, with one play thing, it came off the back of Counterplay. So I don't know if you're familiar with Counterplay. It's a festival play that
but please explain. Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's okay. Yeah, it's a festival play that Matthias Wilson, I think, was sort of director of that ran in Aarhus every, pronunciation is terrible, sorry, every 2 years or so. And Emma Behrman in Leeds ran a Leeds version of Counterplay, which was very exciting. And we all kind of came together and had this amazing weekend of playing together in Leeds. And I met some amazing people that are doing great stuff with play. And one play thing came off the back of that. So it was a way of trying to, you go to these events and you meet people and you say, oh, we'll do all these neat things, and nothing really kind of necessarily happens. And one play thing was well, maybe through Twitter we can keep in touch and we could post playful things and stay connected. So it was a sort of communal idea. And my kind of take on it was to go out and do things with chalk in the street. Emma's, I don't know if you're familiar with Emma Behrman, but she's amazing at getting people to participate and play, because she uses things that they understand, that people understand how to use. So she'll put out big pots of Lego or chalk or hula hoops or bubbles, and people know how to interact with that. It's not scary. So there's no barrier to entry in terms of participation. And I was really kind of inspired by that. So that's why I went out into the street with chalk, because it's a really easy device in and out. it was all kind of site specific. So the things that I come up with on a less inspiring day, because I try to do it every day for about a year and a half. I think on a less inspiring day, I might just write a question out on the street, or on a better day, I might leave some bits of chalk and draw something, invite people to take part. And then I would always take photographs and post what I was doing online, and to stay connected with that community, which was really kind of nice. What I found, what you were saying about urban space and getting people to interact with urban space, is really difficult to get people who are in a rush, who have places to be, who don't have, who are time poor, because we don't have an awful lot of time for play as adults, unfortunately. It is really tricky to get them to engage. So the ones that were more kind of interactive, or invited you to do something, were kind of less successful, whereas I think the ones that were taking something that you saw and changing it, so you could just admire it was passing by, those tended to be the ones that got more likes on Twitter, or people would take photos of them and post them with the hashtag and things. So once I saw there was a spot that was particularly bad for having chewing gum all over it, so I turned them into snowflakes, and some people tweeted them. They weren't even very good snowflakes, but they tweeted them as in, "This is amazing, wasn't this great?" Like taking an eyesore and making it pleasant, but then I'd also, some of my friends would happen upon me whilst I was doing them, and they wouldn't want to be seen with me because they were worried I was doing something wrong. Like because I'm chalking in a public space, like I was breaking rules. So even for some people, the act of doing something that will wash away was too much. Never mind the invitation itself. So it throws up all these really interesting ideas about permissions, and how we behave in public space. And one of the people that I've collaborated most on one plaything with is Malcolm Hamilton, who's based in Bristol, and he does a bunch of workshops with people looking at community space and redesigning community space using chalk, because it's a really great way of reimagining a space that isn't working. And he finds it really kind of quite empowering as a community engagement tool for reporting back to councils and things like that. So he's doing some really exciting work with Play Disrupt, kind of around this sort of permission stuff, and it's a theme in my research that hasn't got as much attention as I would like, and I think something that I'd like to look at moving forward.
Wow,
that's fascinating. I won't. I mean, we have to move on at some point, but I love how even if it's not very in a very upfront way, it's still challenging social norms. Like when you say, and people won't stop to play, it's because we as a society, etc., don't value play as a cultural practice and social practice that much. At best, thanks to COVID, maybe as a social practice in the sense as not to be alone, but not as something that brings value to people's life. And these little contestations, I think are important to bring play more, to value play at least a bit more.
Yeah, I mean, I think the pandemic, if it's taught us anything, that play can help us connect. It can help us. So many people were playing online together as a way to be with their friends and their family, but it's also beneficial for our well-being. So I'm really pleased to hear what you're saying about the value of it, Tatiana. It's great.
And it's also something we can share. So I think a thing that I'm absolutely fascinated about is this intergenerational exchange that happens when we play, whether games or whether we're exchanging something. And I tend to do that a lot in my work, is try to bring together different generations because each contributes something. So whether the new generations are more familiar and comfortable with technology, they can master the game part of the situation. The older generations bring in all their life experience and lived experience of particular stories or particular narratives or particular moments in the city's history that they bring together. So it's a beautiful exchange that can happen around technology and around playing together. I think that's also really exciting.
Yeah, I mean, Alistair, I think we have to move on.
Yes,
a bit.
I think, well, I mean, yes, before we get on to the next set of questions, I think it is time for us to open up the floor for the audience to start, well, Oh, you look like you're about to say
Alistair,
something.
yeah, no, yeah. While you're explaining the audience game, the
Yep.
game to the audience,
Yep.
whatever, I will go to the bathroom because I'm a human being and this is a problem. Like being a robot wouldn't be that much of a problem, but I'm not. So
Right.
please explain the game, and I'll be back in 30 seconds.
Okie dokie. So, okay, so regular viewers of the show will know that every month we have an interactive segment on the show for you, the audience, to take part in. And what we need from you, the audience, is we need some objects. I'm going to switch on the bot now. There we go. You see on down just below Lynn there, it says type exclamation mark followed by an object to add it to the pool. What does that mean? It means that at the end of the show, we're going to challenge Lynn and Mona to come up with a new game or a new controller or screen, maybe even a performance. It's up to them. Come up with something new and creative using objects that you, the audience, type into chat. So if you type, for example, exclamation mark banana, for example, which I'll do right now, exclamation mark banana, and without just, there we go, exclamation mark banana, and you can see I have just added a banana to the pool. So at the end of this chat, I'm gonna, the bot is going to select 5 items from the pool of things that the audience have typed in, and it'll be up to Lynn and Moda to come up with a new game, device, or screen using these items. So please fire away. Let's hear some interesting objects. And if you need me to explain it again, please do type into the chat that you need another explanation from me. But yes, while we wait for the audience to send us their suggestions, I mean, maybe it's a good time to start talking about what it is that you're up to right now. So, yeah, I mean, what are you working on at the moment?
I'll start. I think this year's been an interesting year. I've done Global Game Jam with a different team, which was a bit nerve-wracking. I miss my old team. But the new team is also awesome. Don't want to upset anyone. And we made a little satirical game for the play date. We don't have the play date yet, but you can check it out. It's called Super Play Party, and it's inspired by the current partying culture surrounding our number 10 officials. So you play Sue Gray as she's embarking on uncovering what's happening at number 10. And yeah, we're looking forward to getting the play date and getting that out. And I've worked with Ian Donald and Robin Sloan and Andrew Reed, who are colleagues at Aberdeen Game Lab, and they're all fantastic. So that was just something playful that we've done this year. And I think I'm working a lot more now with museums. So I've worked with the Scottish Fisheries Museum on a couple of projects. And we're working on exploring how we can use games and installations to bring kind of hidden her stories to life. And this is something that I've been exploring through my work since Generation ZXX, where we looked at the women who worked in Timex and how they brought us the ZX Spectrum computers. So similar to that, we are now looking at a very glamorous topic of the Scottish herring lassies, who were amazing women who traveled along with the Scottish herring fleet, gutting fish. And yeah, they were amazing. They were independent. They traveled all around Scotland and England, kind of following the fishing fleet. And we've made a little game about it with a team of third-year students, and we're looking at seeing how we can transform it in a series of installations for museums, and developing it further. So yeah, I think crammed a lot in there.
And Lynn?
Yeah, what have I been doing? I'm in a phase of writing up, I guess, things that I've done. So I worked with Paul Galt from the University of Dundee, and we made a game design toy tool with the Agency of None for the Design Festival here in Dundee. So we're it's kind of like Carcassonne for making mini golf, and it teaches sort of design skills to people who haven't done game design before. So we're studying that and doing some user testing with that, as well as the whale project. We also, quite excitedly, Mona and I have a PhD that we're looking to recruit for, which is looking at how all this, the kinds of things that we're interested in, how bringing people together around play and performance can have some sort of benefit to well-being. I think is the description of it, kind of in a nutshell. And we're really looking for a PhD student who is interested in developing new methodologies for kind of designing and new kind of looking at how we can help organizations in theatre and in mental health and well-being and in communities to maybe use play and design as tools to help people express what they're going through and to come together through play. So that's hopefully going to go out to recruit this year. It did go out to recruit already, and unfortunately we weren't able to appoint anyone, so we're hoping to recruit someone really awesome to work with kind of from February 23 on a PhD for that, which we're excited about because it's kind of taking things that we're really passionate about and working with someone else who's passionate about it to formalize the kind of their interests into something that might benefit large groups of people.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's kind of, and there's also this co-production project that I was talking about that I can't say much about, looking at UK and China co-production as well, which is more kind of the in-game international, it's called, project that I'm on as well.
That's amazing. And I guess, like, you know, just talking about, obviously, you know, your work, both of you working a lot with playfulness, a lot with public spaces, a lot with public interaction. I mean, do you have a sense for, you know, what changes we'd need to see in the world if we want more play in public spaces, better play in public spaces? You know, is there something that you would like to see in the world that would allow us to do that?
I think there's some really interesting questions around who can play freely in public space to begin with. I think we're not all feeling equally safe in public spaces, and I think that's something that needs to be addressed before we can encourage people to play more. I think it's a matter of safety for me, at least. I think it's something that I've been thinking about a lot, is, you know, how we're not equal in public space either.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is certainly true, and I think, I mean, would you be able to elaborate? Do you think are there things that you think could be done, or is it just a sort of a general changes in attitudes, changes in behaviors? What's
Well, I think particularly in the UK, and this is something that we're not talking about at the moment because I think we're still trying to put together some ideas around it, but we've been looking a lot at like the lived experience of being women in contemporary society, and how we can use expressive mechanics, how we can use gameplay mechanics to capture some of that and bring it to wider audiences, to raise awareness about some of the issues that we now face. And I think is in general the cultural and societal norms surrounding being a woman and behavior in public spaces. I think particularly like the freedom to move is something that I'm really passionate about, and how that's perhaps less freedom to move for diverse people. I think it's easier enough to move and run and to play at night, for example, for men than it is for women. So these are some of the things that, you know, I think when we're creating something in public space and we're encouraging people to take part, I think first we need to make sure that they're starting everything on equal footing, particularly in terms of safety.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly agree with that. And I think you raise a really good point, and you raise it very eloquently. Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree.
Sorry to be a downer.
Oh
We
no,
were
not at
talking
all.
about-
Because I think it is like, I think it is important that that we are frightened, that we do live in a society, and even here in the UK, you know, we have big problems with public safety, and in particular that it is a lot safer to be a man in today's society than it is to be a woman in today's society, and that's not fair, like that's not fair, that's not right, and that is something that we should be making efforts to change. And I think it is important to say that, and I think it's important, to say it publicly, and that this is, it's the first step towards meaningful change. Yeah.
And making our public spaces, I think, more playful starts with making them safer and more accessible in general. I think our public spaces are not always very accessible. So yeah, I think that's where it would start for me, I think.
How about yourself, Lynn? Do you have anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I'm glad that Mona raised that, because we believe games in play are really powerful. So I think our early conversations that we're having about our next collaboration together that's not Global Game Jam is going to be about looking at female experience and looking at how games can help to communicate that in particular. And it's not to say that female experience is necessarily the only sort of element that needs attention in terms of inequality, but we're interested in looking at how games can communicate inequalities generally. I just think we're both female and we can draw from our own experiences, so it's an authentic place to start, if that makes sense. So I think that looking at public space and safety in public space is going to be really important with the work that we both do inside that project. But I think another thing in terms of getting people to play in public spaces that's kind of important to look at is giving people permission in themselves. So, I was talking about Emma Behrman and what she does and how she makes it really easy for people to play. I think it is putting things in place that let people step into play, gives them permission. So whether it is that you make spaces that are open and welcome kinds of play, like they have spaces that people are allowed to graffiti without being in danger, whether we need spaces like that for play, or whether it's something that we need to do about being kind of time poor and helping people recognize the value of play, because I think that everything we do is trying to sort of show that play can be valuable and can be beneficial, and we've been doing that so far. I've been doing it personally so far by looking at how it makes those sort of connections between people, but I think there's lots of different ways of doing it, and trying to get that message out in as many ways as we can. So I don't know how that physicalizes itself inside a space, but I think the more that we can help people find the kinds of play that they're comfortable with and feel like that it's worth their time, then I think that's a good step towards giving people permission and encouraging them to do it more. Maybe that's a bit too idealistic, I don't know.
No, I think it's fantastic. I think I think like these, I mean, I agree with both of these. I think everything you've just raised is very, very true and very, very important. And I think there is certainly, I mean, I find, and I'm sure we all do find in our own work, that there is often, when you confront something with something strange. I've got a painting behind me that was made by audiences on Twitch chat, and I do these interactive paintings because I want to give people an opportunity to get messy, for people who are perhaps reluctant to be messy, and I think I think we all have within the things we create that we are always going to butt up against a certain reluctance to be involved, because I think we have, as adults, we've kind of had the play chased out of us in quite a lot of situations. We've been taught to draw straight lines with rulers and be quiet in class. All of these things. And so I mean, I'm like totally on board with everything that you're saying. Like 100% agree. So speaking of playful, silly things and not being afraid of them, another very clean segue there, if I do say so myself. We do have a lot of objects have come through from the chat. Oh, Tatiana's got the drumsticks out, ready for the drum roll. Let's hear it.
I'm gonna roll for this one. It will be on my desk, so.
Right.
Beautiful drum roll.
Magnificent, magnificent. So, your 5
The
objects
words.
are bagpipes, a
Of
net,
course.
a flamingo, an inflatable boy. Oh, wait, sorry, a flamingo inflatable boy.
Exactly.
There we go. A cat and a bandana. Sorry, banana. Not a bandana. I would type these into a chat and I realised that will mess up everything on the screen. So I can see you've
I
all
will
grabbed
write
pieces
them,
of paper.
yeah.
That's fantastic. That was good thinking on your part. So that's bagpipes, a net, a flamingo inflatable boy. So that's
If you
like
think I can write this
BUOY.
fast, if you think I can write this fast, you're very mistaken. A net.
Bagpipes, net, flamingo, inflatable boy. So that's boy is like buoy.
Yeah, that's my word. I'm really happy about this one. And if you struggle on it, I'm so sorry.
And a cat and a banana.
Is it a live cat?
That is for
It
you
wasn't,
to decide.
there is no specification here. So it's up to you to have a dead cat in your game.
Well, it could be a stuffed cat or
Absolutely, absolutely. It can be dead. It can be an object.
okay.
Can be Schrodinger's, and then it's neither dead nor
Oh.
or alive.
I love that it's not specified the color of the flamingo, but I take every opportunity to bring some pink in. So I think that takes it.
So, Mona, I think we need to do something that's to do with squishiness, right? Because bagpipes, you squish them under here, and the boy's got a nice sort of squishiness to
You
it.
can do that with a cat.
Exactly. I was about to say that.
So I wonder if we do a pressure controller, you know, where you're pressurizing the bagpipes, and the bagpipes also require you to blow into them and to. This needs a lot of finger work. So maybe we do something where you have to squeeze and press the buttons on the, I think it's called the chanter, in order to control a net, maybe a motorized net. What do you think?
All I'm thinking is about putting the banana in the bagpipe to silence it.
Okay. So maybe so are we gonna make our first competitive game? So rather than it being collaborative, so you have one person plays the bagpipe and the other person plays the flamingo.
The other person, the other people are trying to silence the bagpipe with various cat, banana, flamingo, and net.
Maybe they're trying to drown it out by making as much noise as they can with their objects.
That's good.
Or how noisy can a banana be?
Maybe if you tickle it.
Yeah, I mean, if you've got a Makey's all about banana keyboards and pianos and things, isn't it? But then I don't know. I mean, I think maybe the flamingo should be the star of the show. So maybe we should make a game with the flamingo as the main controller.
It's inflatable, so it floats. I'm thinking a game on water would be cool. Banana,
nice.
there's
Okay.
also the banana boats. No.
Okay. So are we? Do we have a cat, and we're trying to get the cat to navigate one side, like Frogger, one side of the swimming pool to the other by hopping over these different objects?
Yes, because cats don't like water.
Yeah, it's a bit mean to the. I mean, I don't think cat claws on a flamingo is going to go down well.
Oh, but we have a net. We have a safety.
No, so it's a cat costume, right? So our players have to dress up as a cat, and then they have to get from one side of a 25-meter swimming pool to the other. And when they get to the other side, we measure how wet they are, and whoever is the driest wins. And they have to navigate it using a flamingo, a set of bagpipes, and a banana. The banana
We're
can be
on
the
to
oar.
something. So that's our next game then. It's in a swimming pool. Easy.
I'm building up a very vivid picture here. I'm enjoying. I mean, I think like I've definitely got some cat onesies around the place. So you know, if you want to prototype this sometime, you can head down to. I'll fly up to Abate. Do you have a swimming pool in Abate?
No, but there's one nearby.
All right. Oh,
So
you
we
got
could-
the
or we
sea
could do it in the
nearby as
river.
well.
Yeah.
Or the
Yeah.
yeah. There we go. So we'll bring up. Do you have bagpipes lying around?
Oddly, no, but it's okay. Yeah, no, I'm not a true Scot. But I do live across the road from a school that does bagpipe lessons, so maybe they can
Ooh.
loan us some
Yep.
bagpipes.
Excellent, excellent. And then bananas we can just presumably get in Tesco.
Yeah, I think so.
The flamingo inflatable boy is gonna be.
I'm surprised you don't have one of them already, Mona.
No, I maybe a swimming.
Oh, like a
What do you
ring.
call that? Bagel.
Or like a rubber ring, like a yeah. I think this is a pretty pretty clear and concise concept. I like this. Do we have a name for it? What's the name of this incredible swimming pool flamingo bagpipe game?
This is where you discovered that the other two team members always name our games. I don't know. There's something about there's a saying with like being like a drowned. No, is that a
Cat.
drowned cat? Don't drown the cat. No, that's a rubbish name. Kitty spa time. I don't know. Oh, this is embarrassing.
Well, you make games, right? You don't make game titles.
Yeah.
Okay, at no point it's written somewhere that you are making game titles, so that's fine.
Yeah.
It's also we're very perfectionist with our titles, so we're gonna sleep on it.
I mean, you could use the banana emoji and then have it named banana emoji, and it's it could be an artistic statement. What does it mean?
Yeah, that we could do that.
Or we can just call it Katananana.
Oh yeah, there we go. Katanana.
Katanana. Here
Yeah.
it is.
Validated, definitely validated. Yeah.
Woo!
Brilliant.
Thank you, Mona.
Winner.
Katanana, the first competitive game made by Lynn and Mona. You've got an exclusive here on the IndieCade channel, everyone. So remember you were here to see it. Lynn and Mona, this has been absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on. Is there anything that you'd like to tell our audience about before we head out for the night?
Well, thank you for having us on, and thank you for watching. And watch out for the PhD, I guess, that we're going to be advertising. It'd be lovely to work with cool people interested in play.
So that will be at Abertay University. Yep. And yep.
And it's a studentship, so
funded PhD. Yeah. So yeah. So if you want to come join us in sunny Dundee and make games about cats and swimming pools, we'd love to have you.
That sounds like a fantastic opportunity. Mona, from yourself?
No, play Nimble if you can. We're gonna take it to schools to teach kids about local history. So yeah, it's done by a team of third-year students, so they've been fantastic. But yeah, if you have some time, play it because it's fun. It's not ALT controller yet, but I'm hoping for a knitting controller, so keep an eye out for that.
Oh wow,
teasing. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Mona and Lynn, for joining us. It's been fantastic to have you here. Really, thanks again.
And thank you very
Thank
much
you
to
both.
Oh, thank you. Sorry, interrupted you. Thank you very much, all of our lovely viewers, as always, for watching and joining in. Don't forget that Beyond Screens takes place every Wednesday here on the IndieCade channel. We're here with the Alternative Controller Show on the fourth Wednesday of every month, but on all the other Wednesdays, we've got creators of Playable Theatre, creators of Escape Room, and creators of tabletop games. So please do keep on tuning in to the IndieCade channel to see more of this fantastic programming. Lynn, Mona, thank you so much once again for coming along. Tatiana, thank you for, as always, this has been really, really fun. Yes, and thank you for having me as well to host.
Thanks, Alistair. Someone has to tell it to you. So thank you, Alistair. Goodbye, everyone. See you all again soon. Have a nice evening. Au revoir.
Bye.